Hello, eighth graders. Today we're going to talk about advanced factoring of trinomials. So second degree trinomials with a coefficient of greater than 1 for the x squared term. We're going to learn how to factor those. And we're going to do two things actually. We're going to set up a building block, and then we're going to teach you a procedure for guaranteeing that you can always factor a three-term trinomial. That's factorable. This procedure will always work. So let's go look at what we have to work with today. So we're going to do, first of all, we're going to start off with so this is, whoa, Happy Cat, what are you doing? All right, no Happy Cats. We haven't gotten anything good yet. So we're going to start with a building block. And actually, we're going to learn how to factor four-term polynomials as a building block. And this is weird because we're going to learn how to factor four-term trinomials or polynomials before we learn how to do three-term trinomials. And you'll see why these are concocted four-term polynomials. It will be things that will be interim steps in our three-term factoring. So let's just look at what I'm talking about here. So these four-term trinomials are polynomials. Four-term polynomials or quadrinomials, if you will. They're very concocted. And they are for a reason, and we'll learn that in a second. So we're going to learn how to factor. No, we're not going to do that one first. We're going to do this one first. 8x squared plus 6x plus 12x plus 9. So this is a building block. This is factoring four-term polys. And it's very concocted because in this case, you're always going to have the first term will be x squared. The next two terms are going to be x terms. And then the last term is going to be a constant in all of these examples today. Now, that's not true of all four-term polynomials, but it is true of the ones we're going to learn to factor. And the way that we're going to factor them is twofold. We're going to, first of all, we're going to factor, or we're going to GCF factor term 1 and 2. Then we're going to GCF factor 3 and 4. And then we're going to do a final factor. Okay, so let's watch how this works. So let's GCF factor these first two terms. So we're going to take out a 2x. If that's hard for you to see, well, you can build your chart to do it, but you should by now be able to simplify or be able to see those things. So we'll say that's 2x times 4x plus 3. And on our second term, we're going to see that the GCF is a 3 here. So that's plus 3 times 4x plus 3. Okay, so now that was step 1 and 2. So this was step 1. And this was step 2. So we're almost done now. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to apply our distribution using distribution pattern. So in this case, this is kind of like A times C plus B times C. And we're going to say that equals C times A plus B. Okay, so my C in this case is 4x plus 3. And my a plus b is 2x plus 3. And we're done. That's our factoring. So again, we factored our first thing, we factored our second thing, our second two terms, and then we got to here, and then we factored this guy. And I'll show you another way of thinking about factoring this next guy as we do this thing one more time. And maybe you should try this next one on your own first. So I want you to try this. And when you do it on this one, take out a -6. Don't take out the positive, take out the negative. You should always try and take out a negative if you can on the second term. So take a break, try this procedure, and then see what you come up with. Okay, so now I've assumed you've tried this, so let's just try step one. Step one is to say, well, 3x times x plus 3. And on our second one, factoring the second two, we're going to take out a -6, and that's x plus 3 again. Now notice, we can check this by saying -6x, -6 times x, that's our -6x, and our -6 times our positive 3, there's our -18. So now when we factor, I told you, you can think of it this way, but AC plus BC equals C times A plus B. That's absolutely accurate, but another way you may do that, and some people like to think of it like this, is you just kind of take your x plus 3 down, and then you take your 3x minus 6 down. And if you stare at this long enough, you can convince yourself that the way that I took up here, it's like I kind of took my C's down, the C's that match, and then I took my A and my B down. Here I did the same thing. I took my A down, and I took my B down and stuck those together, and then I took my two C's, and which are the same, and put them here. So that's how we factor 4-term polynomials. I suggest you write this down. We're going to need to use this procedure as we learn to factor 3-term polys. And remember, this won't factor all 4-term polys. It'll just allow you to factor ones that are in a certain pattern. But when we do our 3-term trinomials, you will always be guaranteed to get one of these patterns, which is why this pattern is so important. Now, let me see. I'm going to try and put this on the same sheet here so you can stare at it as we go. I'm going to try and put my new set of rules here. We'll see if it just gets too busy. But it probably will. But I think we'll at least be able to write our rules and do one first. So this is going to teach you how to factor. Now we're going to work on factoring 3-term polys, which are called trinomials, with x squared term greater than 1. Now I'm going to show you a procedure, and the procedure has 4 steps. So let's go through these steps. The first step is going to be, we're going to use big X to break 3-term poly into a 4-term poly. And the way that we do this is the middle term goes on top of big X. This is the same as before. Same as before. Same as you know. And then B, the top, or sorry, the first times the last goes on bottom. So that's a little bit different than before. So let me just write the example up here that we're going to work on, and then we'll come back to the procedure. 3x squared plus x minus 42. Okay. Now let's look at step number 2. So after we do our big X, we're going to create 4-term poly from the big X. And the way that we do that is we're going to copy the first term, and the last term from original poly. And then B, we're going to use big X answer to create middle 2 terms. Okay. And then step 3 and 4, these are the same as these two. This is kind of, I call this step 3, and I call this step 4. Step 3 is you do your GCF factoring. And I kind of combine that into one. So let's watch how this works. Let's watch how this works. So step 1 says big X. So let's use the big X the way that this is step 1. Big X. Now, sorry, let me just erase this really quick. I screwed up here. This is this number is a 14. That's a 14. Okay, so let's do this one. So let's see. So the step 1 is create a big X, and we're going to break our 3-term to break 3-term poly into 4-term. But the way we're going to do it is we're going to take our middle term goes on top of the big X, just like before. So this is a +1 right here. So just like we were doing in our old X when we had just an X squared term of 1, we put our +1 here. Now on the bottom, we would normally put a -14. But instead, on the bottom, we are going to put the first term times the last term. So that's 3 times -14. And we're going to put that here, -42. So we need to think of 2 numbers that added together are a +1, but multiplied are a -42. And the answer to that is, well, 6 times 7 sounds pretty good. A -6, sorry, -6 times a +7. So let's do that. -6 and a +7, because they add to 1 and they multiply to -42. So now that's step 1. So step 2 says we're going to create a 4-term poly from this. And now, when we create the 4-term poly, we're going to copy the first term and last term from our original poly. So we're going to take this one down. That's our first term. And we're going to go 3x squared. And we're going to copy our last term, -14. Now, our middle term is going to be comprised of our answers from the big X. And we're going to put an X on the back of them. So watch what I do. So this is a -6, so I'm going to put a -6x here. And here I'm going to put a positive 7x. Now notice I just put my negative 6x and my positive 7x, took my answers, but I'm going to build this 4-term poly right here. And it's magic. This is complete magic. It will always have this neat, it will always factor nicely. And you can't see that quite yet, but just watch what happens when I do my GCF factoring. So now I'm on step 3 and 4, which are up here. I'm going to GCF factor term 1 and 2. So this is step 3. 3x times x minus 2. And a positive 7 times x minus 2. Oh my goodness! Does anyone see what's going on? I have x minus 2 twice. I have a c times a plus a c times b pattern. I can factor these guys down. So let's watch this. Here's my x minus 2. And here's 3x plus 7. Oh my goodness. I have factored my 3-term poly. Now let's just FOIL this to make sure we're not crazy here. 3x times x is 3x squared. 7 times x is positive 7x. 3x times negative 2 is minus 6x. And then 7 times negative 2 is minus 14. Combining my terms, I get 3x squared plus x minus 14. Oh my goodness, this deserves a happy cat and a crazy spinning happy cat. Oh my gosh, I am so happy that I've solved this very hard problem using this relatively straightforward procedure. Now, I'm going to do 2 more. Now, but before I do these other 2, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to erase this thing on the side over here. And we're going to do 2 more, and we're just going to leave our instructions here on the left. So we can just, or sorry, on the right. We'll leave our instructions on the right, and we're going to do 1 more. So let's do another one. So the second one is 6n squared. This one's a little bit tougher. This one would be really pretty hard to do by guessing and checking. Remember our guessing and checking where we built our grid and we said, well, 2 numbers multiplied, or 2 and a 5 and 1 and a 10 would have to go here because I need 2 numbers that multiply together to give me 6n squared, and add these ones would have to add to 19n. And I'd have to do lots of guessing and munging and trial and error. But watch how this procedure gets us the right answer. So let's go to set this procedure 1, and we're going to build here's 1, and we're going to create our big X. So our 19 goes on top, just as it always does. And on the bottom, though, I'm going to multiply these guys together, and I get 60. So I need to think of 2 numbers that multiply to 60 and add to 19. Well, I don't know how to do that. So let me think. 1 and 60. Well, that doesn't add to 19. Let's see. 2 and 30. No. 3 and 20. No. I'm getting closer though, because this was 61. This was 32. This was 23. Let's see. 4 and 15. Ah, that adds to 19. There's my answer. 4 and 15. So positive 4 and positive 15. Those are my answers. So I've done step 1. Now let's look at step 2. Step 2 says I'm just going to build a 4-term poly. So I'm going to copy my first term and copy my last term. And then I'm going to use these guys to make my middle terms. Now remember, I need to put an N at the end of these. These have to be N terms. Now I want to factor. Step 3 says factor, step 3, factor these guys. And we'll magically get something that just works. It'll just have these extra factors off the end that are the same. So let's see, this first one looks like a 2n times 3n plus 2. And I can check it, 2n times 3n, 6n squared. 2n times 2, 4n, good. This last one looks like a 5. 3n plus 2. 5 times 3n, 15n. 5 times 2 is 10. And so now we're finally to step 4. Step 4, over here we got 2n plus 5. And over here we got 3n plus 2. And if we want to check it, so we're going to box it, but then we'll check it and we'll say, well, 6n squared plus 15n plus 4n, this is 4n, 2n plus 2, plus 10, 6n squared plus 19n plus 10. Whoops. And that deserves another happy cat. So this is a quick. This may stand on its own if you're sharp enough to just be able to grasp this lecture, this chalkboard lecture all at once. Of course, we'll be doing all of this work in class, be solving more problems. But I wanted to leave you with the lecture just in case you wanted to go back and take some notes, or you wanted to do a little of the work to learn in advance, because some people like to learn things in advance, and you preview this, listen to it in class, it'll make a lot more sense. So I want to leave you. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. I love doing these videos. I love the appreciation I get and the applause. Oh, gotta go. Doorbell.